I am so sorry. Sorry if I was laughing earlier. Well, uh, yeah. This is the Tragedy of Aether, the finale. Or in other words, the Tragedy of Aether Part 8. The Tragedy of Aether Part 8. Also note, like, this is just, you know, my thumbnail for it. It's very nicely done. I'm gonna be narrating this. Let's see what's going on here. I'm gonna be narrating this, of course. It's a beautiful, beautiful fanfiction. Now I'm gonna be able to see the chat, because I made the chat window colored instead of fully transparent. One concurrent viewer. Hmm. You know what? You don't need to see the webcam. It's not needed. There you go. Let's meet a goal in viewership. Let's try and reach a viewership goal. Alright? Oh. Not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. Well, I don't mind that. I do not mind that. Let's reach a goal. Let's try and reach 5 concurrent viewers. Let's try and reach 5 concurrent viewers, and if we reach that goal, we can begin. I already put this up on my Fur Affinity. It's... Now, this is probably the biggest text file I've ever made. It is like 18 kilobytes, while most of mine are like 3 to 5 kilobytes. Or a little more. Alright. Let's try and reach 5 concurrent viewers. I've devoted most of my free time into making this, story. Like, it's the final fight, so it has to be eventful. I even got advice from friends of mine that are also interested in the, Rivals universe. stream's current bitrate is lower than the recommended bitrate, my ass. Sugar-coated. Very sugar-coated. Should I move the chat window so that you get to see more of the characters? Alright. Now, with the chat. Oh, my bad. Hey, buddy. Oh. That must have been a fluctuation, I guess. That is a bit problematic. I guess it's better off blocking Dreguidor. You know what, I'm gonna start anyway. I'm gonna probably repeat it once more if I get viewership later in the narration. Fuck. Yeah. There we go. Let me open up the text file. Alright? God damn it. Hang on, if I minimize this window... Okay, so that window has to be open. But I'll get it. I'll get it back. Alright. Let's grab this. And open it up in Visual Studio. Oh, dropped frames. Welcome, my old friend. Chop chop, let's go. Alright. It's all in for affinity markup. Alright, it's back now. Alright. Shall we start the narration? Shall we start the narration? Anyone? We're starting it anyway. We can't just wait like that. This is the Tragedy of Aether, Part 8. A fan fiction series by iiVoltageWolf. The final fight. The three saviors have finally broken the dark seal that was blocking the path to the throne room, as all three of the sources are destroyed. Before they all proceeded to the throne room for the final confrontation, They all took a brief moment to process what they have all accomplished. Clairen, a panther and savior of the champions whose intention is to defeat Loxodont, closes her eyes and looks back at her journey. It started with her being in the fire capital, and hell broke loose, so she had to take necessary action and save everyone, even if it meant traveling to the fortress. Maypul, a raccoon and sylvan watcher with great charisma, began to think about her sister, Mayreed, but she knew that she was praying for her safety. Bellatrix, a canine garbed in red and white robes, and an associate of the monasteries, looked away and shut her eyes, reflecting on how the attack at her monastery led to her emotional scarring. After a moment of reflection, the three ready up and head up the stairs to the throne room. As they all arrived, Bellatrix held her paw in front of Clairen and Maypul and commanded them to remain where they were. "You two," she began, "stay right behind me. This won't be an easy fight." It was then the robed canine gazed at the throne to see a dark, abyssal mass forming around it. As the mass became more dense, it inevitably formed to reveal the Dark Emperor Dreguidor. However, when he materialized, he was sitting in his throne, and not standing. "So we meet again," Dreguidor began, smiling evilly. "I've been waiting for you three." "Answer us," Clairen confronted. "Why do you plan to make Aether a living hell?" "Me oh my," the demonic emperor responded. "I had no idea that all of you were dunces. This will make ridding you a lot easier." It was then Clairen had a wave of anger and clenched her fist, stepping towards Emperor Dreguidor with saber hilt in hand. But she was tossed aside when the Dark Emperor grabbed her by the neck and hurled her at the brick wall. "Listen, you petty mortals," Dreguidor continued. "I was summoned here by you to fulfill your dark desires. Didn't you all have those desires before? We all have desires like those, but this world is not for the likes of you." Bellatrix aggressively shook her fist. "We don't need somebody to fulfill our wishes, as we have the power to do it ourselves." It was then the demonic emperor was growing tired of listening to what he thinks is nonsense and draws his blade. With closer inspection, the saviors noticed the arm that has been sliced off is back. Without any more hesitation, Maypul and Bellatrix ready their blades and join battle. And Clairen shakes off her injuries and powers on her plasma saber, dashing towards Dreguidor with true intent of killing him. As Bellatrix and Maypul were clashing blades with the Dark Emperor, Dreguidor senses the futuristic panther's approach and places a paralysis curse on her before continuing the fight. It was then Maypul had an idea. Once she was away from the enemy, she hurls a seed towards Dreguidor, but much to her dismay, it was knocked back and it marked her. Being marked with her own projectile, Maypul dashes back towards the demonic emperor, but she was knocked aside when she tried to impale him from the back. With two saviors temporarily out of commission, this became a one-on-one battle between Bellatrix and Dreguidor. When their blades clashed and held together, the robed canine of light looked the Dark Emperor in the eyes murderously. Unfortunately, when their blades finally parted ways, Bellatrix attempted to kick his face, only to abruptly get grabbed and flung to the furthest wall. "Really?" Dreguidor ridiculed the saviors. Are you ladies really that weak? As soon as he was finished taunting, he slowly approached the extremely vulnerable Maypul with his blade over his head, and at the very last second, when the blade was being swung downward, the raccoon shakes off her inner injuries and rolls to the side to dodge the blade. This caused Dreguidor's blade to get stuck in the floor temporarily, allowing Maypul a small window of time to further distance herself from the Dark Emperor. Now that her target is vulnerable, she tosses another seed at his back, successfully marking him with the Watcher's Mark. It's time, Maypul mumbled to herself, dashing until she's a sufficient distance and entangling the Dark Emperor in vines. That was when Clairen was freed from the paralysis curse. Unfortunately, the vines didn't hold Dreguidor for long, as he broke free shortly after, and finally pulled his blade out of the floor. Now, the clash continues, but it's between a futuristic panther and a Dark Emperor. Bellatrix, now regaining consciousness, recovers and attempts to give Clairen a hand, dashing towards Dreguidor with her sword, ready. Well, he's distracted. But much to her dismay, the Dark Emperor teleports behind her and grips onto her hood before slamming her to the floor. At this moment, Bellatrix was in a perilous situation. But when Dreguidor was just about to impale her in the spine, he was grabbed by Clairen using her plasma grip and tossed to the furthest wall of the throne room. "Get up, Bellatrix!" the panther shouted. "You won't be free for long!" As if those words granted strength, Bellatrix recovered and got back up, grabbing her sword once more. "I owe you one," she replied. "Thank you so much." It was then that the robed canine of light witnessed Maypul acting strange, and this was bad news. There were abyssal masses swirling around the raccoon, meaning that it is likely that the abyss is controlling her. Further proof was that her fur was becoming unbelievably messy. Her eyeballs turned black and her irises began to glow red. "Command me, my lord and master," Maypul spoke to Dreguidor, now with an evil, low-pitched voice. "Destroy these targets, my lady," the Dark Emperor commanded her, pointing his blade towards his enemies. Indeed, this was bad news. Not just bad, but absolutely terrible. Maypul is possessed, and both Clairen and Bellatrix have to find a way to get her back. Fortunately for Bellatrix, being an associate of the monasteries whom has the ability to see beyond abyssal curses, sees through the curse afflicted on the raccoon, and she commands Clairen to focus on Emperor Dreguidor while she deals with Maypul. As Maypul and Bellatrix clashed blades, the fight was getting more intense with every passing minute. Fortunately, the robed canine was able to trip the possessed raccoon, making her vulnerable to attack, and that was when the evil curse revealed itself, resembling a dark, abyssal orb. In a flash, Bellatrix leapt into the air and cleaved the orb in half, freeing Maypul from the curse that possessed her. "I'm sorry, Bellatrix," she apologized. "What have I been doing?" "No time for talk. Get up," Bellatrix shouted. "We must stop Dreguidor." Upon witnessing the lifting of the curse controlling the raccoon, Dreguidor shook his fist and growled, "How dare you! You'll pay for taking my lady from me." "I am not your lady," Maypul retaliated. "I will never be a Dark Emperor's lady." It was at this moment when the Dark Emperor made Clairen vulnerable and tossed her at the nearby wall before placing a paralysis curse on her. With Clairen not able to move, this left Maypul and Bellatrix in the battle, so they both planned an attack, which was for Bellatrix to clash blades with the Dark Emperor, while Maypul attempts to entangle him. The first part of the plan worked, but when the raccoon tried to entangle Dreguidor, he noticed it and cleaved her vine in half. "Impossible!" Maypul cried. "How is this guy so good?" "I'm a fallen deity, remember?" the Dark Emperor replied as he clashed blades with Bellatrix. "I'm a legendary being who will eternally rule all of Aether." At this moment, the blades broke free of the clash, leaving both combatants vulnerable. But when Dreguidor attempted to perform a downward slash to slice his enemy down the middle, Bellatrix successfully roundhouse kicked him in the face, disarming him temporarily and leaving him vulnerable. Not only that, but this also lifted the paralysis curse afflicted on Clairen. "Thank you, Bellatrix," the Panther thanked. "I would have been in that uncomfortable position for a long time were it not for your intervention." Without any more hesitation, Clairen readies her plasma saber once more and dashes towards the demonic coyote as he was retrieving his blade. And she thought that the fight would be over at this point, but she was wrong. Dreguidor grabbed his blade off the ground and swiftly turned towards the futuristic Panther, proceeding to clash blades with her. "We will destroy you, Dreguidor," the Panther growled. "We will send you back to whence you came." At this moment, their blades broke free and Dreguidor slammed her into the floor. Now, Clairen is in a perilous situation here, as she's extremely vulnerable. Just as she was accepting her fate, Maypul and Bellatrix distract the Dark Emperor, allowing her to recover. When Maypul was clashing with Dreguidor, she was stunned, slashed once, and tossed aside. "Ouch!" she writhed. "You got me good." Luckily, this slash was small, but it was deep, so she got back on her feet and hurled another seed at her enemy when he's distracted to mark him. However, that seed was also seen by him and was clobbered back towards her, but she dodged it right on time before it could mark her. This was when the raccoon realized that her ideas are not working efficiently anymore. So she had another plan, which was to use her vines to grapple to the wall and swing down to stun the Dark Emperor. Or the ceiling. Yeah. When she grappled onto the ceiling of the throne room with her vines, she swang until she was able to cling to the ceiling. "What are you doing, Maypul?" Clairen asked. "This is no time for fun and games." "You'll see what I'm doing," Maypul replied. "Just keep distracting him." When Dreguidor continued to clash blades with Clairen, he eventually stepped into the sweet zone, and Maypul swang down and kicked him off his feet. Now that the Dark Emperor is vulnerable, Maypul marked him and entangled him once more. "Curses!" Dreguidor snarled. "You fools got me again." At this moment, Bellatrix and the futuristic Panther took positions and readied their blades together. "Are you ready, Bellatrix?" Clairen asked, holding her plasma blade outward. "I am if you are," the robed canine answered. "Let's finish this." The two slashed in an X formation, and expected that to be the end of the battle. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, as that attack only broke his armor. With his armor destroyed, Dreguidor leapt into the air and powered up his blade, making it massive in size and extremely powerful. "Us three must work together," Bellatrix reminded. "He's weak now, and there are now portals opening around him." I'll finish him off with my light powers. Take positions. Without a moment's hesitation, she steps to the center of the room and charges up her powerful light attack, while Clairen and Maypul destroy the balls of darkness coming out of the portals that slowly approach the center of the room. With every passing second, the spawning of these abyssal orbs gradually quickens, and the orbs speed up, making the situation tougher to deal with. Not only that, but the skies of Aether began to gain a more saturated look, darkening as ashes fly upwards and the moon turns blood red. "We're not going to last much longer!" Maypul cried. "How long does this take?" "Calm down, Maypul," Bellatrix replied calmly as she concentrated her light. "It shouldn't be much longer." "Really?" Dreguidor ridiculed. "Do you realize that you cannot defeat me now?" At this point, it's quite clear that there's a winner approaching, and it's not the Dark Emperor. As this grueling fight came to a climax, the portals finally closed, and no more abyssal orbs are being created. With her light charged and concentrated to the max, Maypul and Clairen returned to their positions and held their paws out towards the light as Bellatrix has it in hand. "Goodbye, Emperor of Darkness," they all farewelled. "Prepare to die." After speaking those words, Bellatrix released the light, completely destroying Dreguidor without a trace. Very faintly, the Dark Emperor's death cry was heard, and once the fight was over, the fortress began to crumble. "Let's go, you two," Maypul spoke. "This place won't hold for long." Much to the team's dismay, the exit was blocked off by fallen debris. But all was not yet lost. Windship 2, the gunship of the air armada, was very close by, and the pilot witnessed the place crumbling to ruin. "Maypul, this is Windship 2, the pilot spoke. "Allow us to lend you a hand. Or wing." Upon receiving that message, the team took cover behind some fallen debris, and the pilot of Windship 2 blew the front wall away and hoisted lower, allowing the three saviors to climb aboard. The team thanked the air armada to the bottom of their hearts and watched as the fortress gets reduced to ruins. Clairen, for some reason, flinches and couldn't get up, and Maypul looked quite concerned about it. "Clairen, are you okay?" she asked, tilting her head. Unfortunately, the Panther confirmed what happened. Apparently, Loxodont was injured while the culling was still happening, and he just now died from his wounds in the med bay. How Clairen confirmed this happening remains a mystery, but Bellatrix believed that the Grand Deity filled her in, and considering that her job is over, she's fading away from this era. "Goodbye, both of you," the Panther spoke her final words before vanishing completely. "Clairen, I'll never forget you," Maypul grieved. "Thank you, Clairen," Bellatrix began. "You've really made yourself a hero like us, and you have disappeared honorably." After flying back to the Fire Capital, Windship 2 lands and drops the two remaining saviors off. When the common folk saw that there are no more abyssal beings roaming around Aether, they all rushed out of their homes and gave both Bellatrix and Maypul a warm welcome. Soon after the two remaining saviors arrived at the Palace of Flame, they were both greeted by Zetterburn, who's emotionally scarred for seeing his brother be injured during the culling. The interior was a tiny bit knackered and broken, but it was still enough to keep the building from collapsing. Small pieces of debris covered the floors. The carpet was partially burnt. The walls were covered in cracks, and items were scattered all over the place. "Welcome to the Palace of Flame, Maypul," he began. "And who are you, brave monastery knight?" "I'm Bellatrix." Bellatrix introduced herself to the Line of Fire. "I usually don't tell anyone my name, as I fear that I'll be targeted by the cult that summoned the Dark Emperor that we defeated." "Don't worry, Bellatrix," the lion replied. "You're safe to tell me that stuff, as I'm going to be the new emperor of the Fire Capital soon." That revelation alone surprised Maypul and Bellatrix as they admired that idea. But at that moment, one of the medics rushed over to Zetterburn to tell some news. "Zetterburn," the medic gleefully greeted. "Good news. Your brother, Forceburn, is going to be okay." "Terrific," the lion cheered. "I'm so happy that my brother is okay. I would have been nothing without him." Upon hearing this great news, he checks on his brother for a short time before returning to the palace to announce that he is running to be the new emperor, with this special phrase being, "I will finish what father started. I will make Aether a utopia." Because everyone in the Fire Capital knew Zetterburn's strength and skill in combat, he easily won the vote and is now deemed the new emperor to replace Loxodont. "To remember this day, and all that have fallen during the culling," he began, "we shall have a feast to honor the brave heroes that fought the Abyss, and mourn for those that were unfortunate." The common folk cheered and applauded, as this was a great idea for remembering this very day. The table and chairs were set up soon after the plans were revealed, and fresh, tasty food was being prepared in the kitchen. When the crowd got to the thinnest point, Emperor Zetterburn stepped off of the pedestal and thanked Bellatrix and Maypul for their successful mission, and gave them both an emblem of Excalibur. "What's this?" Maypul asked. "Does it do anything?" "That is the emblem of Excalibur," Emperor Zetterburn answered. "If you have this with you when Excalibur sees you, he'll recognize you as a hero of Aether, and you'll be able to enter his monastery." With that out of the way, the two remaining saviors head over to the feasting table and take a seat. The feast lasted until early afternoon, and Maypul, sensing that Mayreed might be worried, departs after the feast and returns to the forest to go home and greet her little sister. Bellatrix, on the other hand, had a new quest on her shoulders, which was to track down the cult that summoned Dreguidor and destroy it. But that story can be told another time. Well, that concludes the Tragedy of Aether, the original series. Now, I have a feeling that following up with these events, there will be a sequel series, like I announced in an earlier stream. There will be a sequel series called The Tragedy of Aether. It's either Blood Macabre or Dark Macabre. Yeah, Blood Macabre. Yeah, Blood Macabre. And it's gonna have new characters, a new story, a new timeline. But I really want to know your opinion. Should I create some sort of like DLC stories that are like how Destiny 2 has DLC to expand the story? Well, I'm thinking of doing that with the Tragedy of Aether. Have the original series, and then a series that happens alongside the events. Some of them might be one-offs, some of them might be an actual series. Like, I have one in mind, that's going on right now, and it's basically the Tragedy of Aether before Tragedy, and the main character is Fleet, and she eventually meets someone who is a skilled whip wielder. And, those two try and defeat Dreguidor. They were close, but Fleet dies. Fleet dies in the process, and the whip wielder gets injured. And I will not go into detail how, because that would be spoiling too much. As for Blood Macabre, that story series, it's going to be set in the future. Uncle Zetterburn, Grandfather Forceburn, Grandmother Clairen, they might have an appearance. And Clairen will also be back as one of the main protagonists. So I will go into a brief sort of details, like the minimum details possible. So there's going to be Clairen, which is a plasma blade wielding combatant. Then we got an air soldier whose weapon is a wind gun, which shoots projectiles, like bullet-like projectiles, at high velocity using compressed air. And then we have another sword wielder, but this sword wielder is an associate of the Monastery of Excalibur. And basically, he's the one that gets betrayed. Anyway,